I'd like to welcome everyone to our first meeting of 2020 for the Design Review Commission for January, for Germantown in January. At this time, please call roll to establish a quorum.
Okay. Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Ms. Sherman?
Here.
Mr. Carney? Mr. White?
Here.
Alderman Owens?
Here.
Chairman Bruns?
I am here. We do have a quorum, which would bring us to the adoption of our revised agenda for those of you that did or did not see that. Motion, please.
I would like to make a motion to approve the revised agenda for this evening.
Second.
Please call roll.
Mr. Carney? Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Revised agenda is adopted. And a little housekeeping at this time for the Vice Chair and Secretary for the year 2020. The floor is open for nominations for the Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Mr. Christopher Schmidt as Vice Chairman. A second.
Thank you. Any further nominations? Well then, I guess we'll just call roll.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Carney? Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt? Sorry, Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Congratulations, Christopher.
Well, thank you.
And now I'll open the floor for nominations for Secretary. We are missing someone this evening, but it can still be nominated.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to nominate Robert Sloan.
Second.
Any further nominations? Very good. Please call roll.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Carney? Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Alderman Owens? Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Now we have the approval of our minutes from the November 26th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from November 26th.
Second.
Very good.
Okay. Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Abstain, I was not present.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Carney?
Yes, I did watch the televised.
Okay, good, thank you. Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Minutes are approved. That will bring us to item number 5 on our, 6 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. There were 2 items as posted on the consent agenda. Item 6A, Dr. Clark and Dr. Pardon me, say again, please. Sadehi, thank you. Approval of 2 revised wall signs. And item 6B, Houston High School, approval of revised final site plan to allow for parking expansion. In executive session, we added formerly item number 7A and making it now 6C, Avenida Watermark Senior Living, approval of ground-mounted sign and entrance wall. And that will conclude, those 3 items would make up our consent agenda. So is there anyone in the audience or on the commission that would like to have any of these items removed from the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I'd like to remind all the commissioners that by voting on the consent agenda, you are agreeing to each of the cases as they have been listed tonight. You have read and reviewed each of the applications with staff and the applicant and have determined no further discussion is necessary. May I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. Please call roll.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Kumar?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Carney?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Consent agenda is passed. So for those of you that are here this evening for that, thank you for attending. And you may leave. Bringing us to our next item, which is item 7C. Cell Tower 7254 Neshoba Road, approval of wireless transmission facility within an MLG&W transmission tower. Staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 7A before you is a new cell tower at 7254 Neshoba Road. It is located within an existing MLG&W tower in an MLG&W and TVA easement. As you see here, the arrow points directly to the existing transmission tower in which the proposed cell tower would be placed. This shows the area of the proposed cell tower's lease area, that this would be the entranceway, the access road, and then back here would be the equipment compound for the new transmission tower. I'm going to skip a couple slides to give you a little better perspective here. Here you can see the existing transmission tower. The proposed cell tower will be placed inside of it for one carrier, and to the north of it would be an equipment enclosure, which would be enclosed with an 8-foot-high wooden fence. Going back to the site plan here, there will not be any landscaping around the equipment enclosure. This is due to MLG&W restrictions of landscaping and what is allowed within their utility easement. There will be a proposed fence, split rail fence, along the front of the portion of the property that will be 4 feet high, and crepe myrtles as well. The front portion of the drive here will be paved, and then there will be a 4-foot-high metal gate, and behind that the rest will be gravel. As you can see, this is what it looks like now on Neshoba Road, and this is the photo simulation of what it would look like with that split rail fence, the crepe myrtles, the entrance drive here, the first portion of it asphalt, and then back here would be the equipment enclosure. The applicant is requesting a waiver to the landscape buffer requirements as outlined in section 23-86I. In that section, it says that there should be a minimum 50-foot buffer strip with landscape screening before the tower. As mentioned, that is not possible due to restrictions from MLG&W, what is permitted within their easements. The applicant has provided, though, this aesthetic element to enhance the streetscape somewhat. I don't have a picture right now, but on the opposite side of the street, this is what you see, and the rest of the TVA and MLG&W easements on the other side of the street. There is a 4-foot-high split rail fence and crepe myrtles, so this is to mirror what is on the other side of the street. There would not be any lighting associated with this proposal. After this proposal is reviewed and approved by the Design Review Commission, it would then advance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for final review and approval. As mentioned, as part of the Design Review Commission decides to approve this today, it would be for the site plan as laid out with this tower, with the 8-foot-high wooden fence around the equipment enclosure, the 4-foot-high wooden split rail fence along here, and the waiver to limited landscaping from the section 2386I of the city's zoning ordinance. The applicant's representative is here for questions.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Good afternoon, Cece Drayton from Baker Donaldson Law Firm. I'm here on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I would just like to add that Verizon has, taken into consideration the request of the Design Review Subcommittee. I believe the last time I was here, there were specific requests made in terms of the use of the split rail fence as well as adding the shrubbery in front. And so this has been a very long process. We've done everything that we've been asked to do, certainly I believe within reason, and we're just seeking the approval of the Design Review Commission here tonight, and hopefully we can get approved.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I'd like to open the floor for a public hearing. Yes, sir. Step up. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Alan Webb. I live at 1619 Fireside Cove. I have a prepared statement because I'm not great at this.
Yes, sir.
To reiterate, my name is Alan Webb. My family and I reside on Fireside Cove, which is immediately adjacent to the subject property. Yes? Could you please just state your address and then if you're for or against? 1619 Fireside Cove, against.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's to the left of this picture. It's a generous picture. After being born and raised here in Shelby County, we moved away to Franklin and made a concerted decision to move back here. When we moved back, Germantown was an obvious choice. Its parallels to Franklin are pretty obvious to us, and I'm not reading off my thing. The reputation and vision of Germantown made for a natural transition. We appreciate that there is thought put into maintaining residential areas and fostering community. Within the application and community meetings, the applicant focuses on the monopole tower and its placement as reasoning for design approval and appropriateness, including that it will not change vistas and viewpoints. However, there is more to this project, and the pole is a small part of the visual and design aspect of the installation. The packet released Friday night shows an updated rendering with an access road, parking pad, fencing, and supporting infrastructure. It suggests a gate which is not shown in the rendering. This is a permanent commercial fixture in a residential area. The purposes stated by the applicant within the application is for resolving overcapacity on a data plan offered by Verizon. It is the job of neither the City of Germantown nor its residents to support a business decision made without the proper infrastructure in place, which would impact the look and feel of our community. From Germantown's DRC Manual, Section 2.2, the Design Review Commission is always open to alternative approaches. However, it is the applicant's responsibility to demonstrate that the result will be as appropriate as other successful structures. I believe the following provide enough justification to preclude granting of any waivers or approvals for this site design, especially when judged against existing implementations. While the placement of a tower itself is allowed within residential zoning, this site and design contradicts the city's design principle of protect residential property, immediately to the left and then covered conveniently with the white box right there, from any negative impact that might result by adjoining or being in close proximity to commercial development. This is the only site I can find in Germantown with this proposed design, being in a residential area within immediate view of the road. Most are either in fully commercial sectors or set back in wooded areas near community centers. These prior implementations can be good guidelines on the appropriateness of this proposal. The application states this project qualifies for design approval because it fits in with the surrounding commercial area. This is a residential area from zoning and usage. Directly for the landscaping buffer requirement, it should not be waived as it crosses several of the design principles within the DRC Manual 2.1, including dominant landscape. highlighting there that appropriate boundaries, or at boundaries between land uses, dense planting should provide the separation necessary to avoid conflicts. This is impossible with MLG&W's requirements. Public versus private domains. All that is visible from public streets and open spaces should be carefully controlled, while individuality is encouraged in more private areas. Masking the utilitarian. The important viewpoint in judging design quality is how it will be seen from adjacent public streets and bordering sites. It does not appear that the parking pad can be screened from public view. The land is elevated in relation to the street. Changing the grading would represent a significant change to the topography. In accordance with the DRC's guidelines and staff recommendations, the landscaping plan appears incomplete. There are several attributes I did not see that were filled out. As stated by MLG&W in their correspondence regarding this project, the applicant can provide no guarantees on the landscaping or the fencing plan along the street setback, which is integral to their proposed design. The applicant's reasoning for a higher fence around the equipment enclosure is to deter theft. Crime as a reason for design adjustments highlights that this installation should not immediately abut residences. I believe there are locations within Germantown that do not present these issues. The design is incompatible with the area. One needs only turn around and look at the open fields, animals, and residences. In reference to the fence, it does look similar from the design. However, opposite the other fence are horses, and then other horses next to them. And then further down the easement is a public park and lake. This route is used daily by many, many Germantown residents, from school children to retirees on walks to me trying to make my best 10-minute mile. The MLG&W towers were approved in the 1960s, and thankfully design standards have changed. For design and fit, this is a new addition and should be considered on its own merits. The site has been granted enough waivers at this point. The site usage is not fitting with the area. It is immediately visible, unable to be aesthetically improved, and non-compliant in the current form. This city is my home as it is yours. The applicant and the landowner don't live here and do not understand that this is a large change for the look and feel of our residences and walking paths. I recommend the waivers not be granted for the reasons I have stated. As a last resort, if you are considering granting the waivers, I would request that the decision be deferred until the newly formed Cell Tower Commission can review and inform on if this particular location and design is worth the trade-offs our community will make. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very well prepared. Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak to this in the open hearing? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and then offer the applicant a rebuttal.
One second here. So one of the things that I want to raise here is that pursuant to Section 23-86C2, of the Germantown Ordinance, wireless transmission facilities are allowed within residential districts with the approval of a use on appeal approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, which we have already obtained effective as of August 13th, 2019. That use on appeal was granted to allow the cell tower within this existing MLGW transmission tower at this particular site. Pursuant to Section 2386C1, the Planning Commission also reviewed this site, and we were allowed to move forward after making a few revisions, as well as after we submitted various waiver requests. We are here again tonight, I believe probably a year and a half almost later, because we started our original application. We submitted our original application for the Forgy Park location, and we were asked to find an alternative site, which Verizon has done, and this is the site where we landed. Again, this is an existing MLGW transmission tower, and you can see from there the monopole is going to be, you know, it's in there. It's not glaring to the eye. Most of these monopoles, when you drive by and you look at them, you really can't even distinguish the pole from the tower itself. We've also taken the extra steps of moving the equipment cabinet behind the tower, as we were asked by the Planning Commission. That was done, and now we've taken the extra step of putting up the shrubbery as well as the rail fence to match the opposite side of the street. To say that this site is an eyesore, I don't believe that that is a plausible reason for denial tonight. Certainly, this Design Review Commission is well within its authority to allow these modifications to the landscaping and the fencing plan that has been submitted by Verizon. The fencing plan, I believe we were specifically requested to look at the split rail fence based on the 4-foot height, which has been implemented here. And in terms of the 8-foot fence, that is a pure security safeguard that is used by Verizon for each of its sites. It believes that that further promotes the security for all of the residents that are involved within the area. So we firmly believe that pursuant to the provisions of the ordinance, the Germantown ordinance, the Design Review Commission has the authority to not only review the landscape and fencing plan that has been submitted on behalf of Verizon, but also to approve this plan as submitted, and we would ask that our application be approved accordingly.
Thank you. Very good. Well, I will now entertain a motion for item 7A in order for us to begin discussion.
I have my staff report in front of me. Your staff report there, does it have projected motion?
Yes, please.
So at this point, this might be a little different than we've done in the past, but there, similar to the EMA, the motion is presented, there is a second, and that then opens the floor. That does not mean when we present the motion that you are for the motion completely as written. It is an avenue for you to start discussion, and then after you finish your discussion, you then vote on that motion.
Yes, and the motion's provided in the agenda packet, and it's generally in an affirmative nature, but it does not mean that you are voting one way or another in presenting the motion.
Yep, so I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary and final site plan for 125-foot-high wireless transmission facility or cell tower located within an MLG&W transmission tower, including an 8-foot-high equipment enclosure and a 4-foot-high wooden split rail fence, including a 4-foot-high metal gate along a portion, actually that's, is that, yeah, that's correct, along a portion of the front of the property, approximately 10 feet from the front property line at 7254 Neshoba Road, subject to the commission's discussion, staff comments in the staff report, and the documents and plans submitted with the application.
Thank you.
I second.
Very good. Now the floor is open for discussion. Or questions of staff.
You mentioned that it's been a long procedure to get here. Where were your previous sites?
Sort of straight across.
The dog park.
Yeah, the dog park.
Yes, the Forgy Dog Park.
Within the right-of-way, still same vein of thought, within the MLG&W? Correct. Okay.
So I have a question from the DRC Commission. Are we looking at the location? I mean, do you have authority to look at the location, or is it beyond our purview?
Solely aesthetics as presented tonight, which would consist of a I'm using the term waiver, but a waiver from what is required for the landscaping buffer and what the applicant has introduced along the side of Neshoba as a new landscaping buffer, or what we had requested of her. Certainly, the floor is open, so yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would say, one, I guess I'm appreciative of the landscaping and the fencing that has been put in, the Design Review Commission's request. I have, I guess, a little bit of a different take on it in that, in my capacity as alderman, I hear from quite a few of our residents who are clamoring, who are at their wits' end because they don't have appropriate cell service, to the point of, in my mind, it becomes a security issue, and that if we have to get emergency vehicles to them and they don't have a landline for whatever reason, and the signal is not there, then we really almost have an obligation, in my opinion, to assist in providing this type of cell service, or provide additional cell service when we can and when it is appropriate. This location for me is something I believe the city looks for in terms of we try to co-locate our towers. We try to co-locate our antennas. If we have one tower and we tack on multiple antennas when we can. In recent months, we have added to the height of our cell tower ordinance to allow for a little bit additional height so we can get better coverage. We've reduced the fall zone. We've done a number of things because of the fact that the cell service in Germantown is not good, and I think we all know that. I believe this is one of the least intrusive locations when you're talking about a co-locate and you're having it in, let's call it what it is, some rather garish MLG&W towers. It certainly, in my mind, is a better location than having one stuck out by itself with antennas, be they a monopine or not. And so from my perspective, I think the applicants have done a good job in moving where they were asked to move, or at least away from the dog park, and providing some landscaping and still co-locating in an MLG and W tower and not providing a single standalone tower. So I appreciate that. I'll be voting for this.
Well said. I would say, as the gentleman mentioned, the task force has been set forth in order to help with service coverage, aesthetics, and everything associated with the cell towers in Germantown. One question for the applicant would be, as this task force moves forward, as the gentleman also mentioned, do you feel that the research you did and put the cell tower as it is located would be found the same in the view of a task force in the future?
Yes, sir. I do believe that based on the heat maps, the propagation maps that were originally offered to the Planning Commission as well as the BZA, those maps clearly, justify the need for coverage, expanded coverage, the enhancement of the 911 services out here in Germantown. And the site itself, I mean, is Alderman Owen stated, to co-locate in an existing tower, and you're using a monopole tower, I think it is the most unobtrusive effect that Verizon could have used. And we did look at various locations. I believe Ms. Gorleski and I have been working together, again, probably for, I would say, at least a year and a half. In that time period, we looked at, we had discussions about several different areas, even some that she, recommended to us. Yes, to answer you definitively, yes, I do believe that Verizon would have made the same decision and still submitted the application, even if there was a task force involved in the discussions.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, I mean, do we need more towers? Are they going to cover the entire Germantown?
Verizon is analyzing right now the need for additional towers in this area. What the, results of that are at this particular time, I honestly don't know. But I do know that they have determined a need for this particular tower. And I do recall, not to keep, reverting back to the Planning Commission, but I do recall there being a lot of discussion and some constituents coming forward during that particular Planning Commission meeting talking about the need for expanded coverage in this area. So not only is Verizon trying to, as the gentleman stated, satisfy their own business needs, they're also trying to provide a service out here which will impact and have a great benefit to the residents and the businesses in this area.
We certainly do know it's an issue. Do any of the commission members have any questions they'd like to mention to either staff or the applicant before the vote? It's okay, but I'd have to ask council with the new order of events we use now. Then we can start over through the process. We would just repeat everything from the beginning of the open hearing. I'm going to say if you feel something that you would really like us to hear, then I will waive, or I will ask these commissioners to waive, so you have one more chance to speak, sir. And then we will ask for another rebuttal, and then we will take our vote if there's no further discussion. Would you like to speak before the board? Would everyone agree to waive for this instance? Sure. Very good.
I appreciate the opportunity and stepping outside the bounds of the normal order. I would like to respond to a few things. She just stated that a constituent came forward at the Planning Commission in support of this tower. That is not true. I was the constituent who came forward at the Planning Commission against the tower. Well, in questioning of the tower, I was corrected multiple times during that commission meeting that this is mainly a monopole structure. It is not. It is a driveway, it is a commercial access to immediately residential area. The waiver they're asking you for is a 50-foot buffer to a trampoline that 6 kids play on every day. The waiver that they're asking you for is a 50-foot buffer to my neighbor's backyard. That's what they're asking for. Those pictures are very conveniently taken. Like I said, they put a box over somebody's house to make a note of how high something was going to be. They are trying to obscure how close this is to residences. I went through the MLGNW, or the Shelby County GIS system. They will show you where all of the cell towers are in the entire county. This is the only one, if you approve this, within Germantown, that immediately abuts a residence and is visible from a public road. This isn't even a major corridor. This is Neshoba. It's the only one. You will be beginning this process. That's why I'm really trying to highlight this. I watched the BZA meeting, which I did not get an invite to the BZA meeting. I'm fairly new, and I don't think that the applicant had updated their NCOA, their addresses, or else I would have been at that meeting. But I was at the planning meeting, and I immediately sent in, well, relatively short after, I sent an email with Alderman Owens on it as well with a number of concerns. Later I learned that you need to respond a little bit faster for appeals, but that's why I'm here today. The applicant, and in the prior meeting, I believe the mayor, highlighted 911 service. I live there. We have Verizon service. It's not great. AT&T service is really good, and they don't have a tower anywhere close. They have found some other way to do this, so have other providers.
We cannot, I'm not going to debate cell
okay,
service.
I'm just highlighting, they're predicating this on us needing cell service is almost a safety issue. 911 calls will route through any cell tower. If you pick up a phone from the 90s and it has a battery charge, you will get 911 services. Now, there are E911 services. The applicant themselves does not use 911 as a reason for tower placement in the application. It does not mention it. It mentions solely that they will support E911 services. But that's not the basis for their argument. The tower needed to be placed because their Verizon unlimited data plan is over capacity. I think that's the portion. Oh, also, it is within an MLG&W tower. On that same ArcGIS site for Shelby County, you can see all the transmission towers. There are hundreds of these, many of them not in the immediately public view or abutting residences. They're in commercial areas. There's a lot of other available sites. I believe there's a cell tower on top of this building, actually, which seems like a pretty good way to reuse areas. I'm just emphatic because I live here and I'm going to be living here. And in 4 years, we may see 5G or a new technology, but this parking pad, it's going to stay there. I don't want to tell people when they're driving to my house, yeah, take a right past the cell tower and the parking pad and all the infrastructure instead of right past the horses. The second one sounds like a lot more Germantown thing to say. I'll leave it at that. I think I've rambled enough.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you for reminding us of that. Would the applicant, or do any of the commissioners, does anyone have any further comments before our vote? It appears there are none, so we will call a vote. Please state your reason for.
Reintroduce it now.
The motion's still open because the floor is still open, so yes. Our motion's still good. So please state a reason when you are called on for your vote.
Mr. Schmidt?
Although I appreciate the gentleman's research and presentation and reasoning, I do have to vote in favor of the cell tower, or the fencing and the landscaping for the enclosure and along Neshoba. Because of the restrictions on the MLGW transmission lines in terms of clearances, landscape clearances, and taking that landscaping and applying it into an aesthetic improvement along Neshoba, I believe warrants the DRC's approval. So I vote in favor of the.
Mr. Kumar?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Smith. I understand that the location of the tower is not in a purview of Design Review Commission, and I understand the restrictions regarding the landscaping around the enclosure. So the alternative solution they have provided along the landscaping along the Neshoba Road, I think that should be acceptable, so I vote in favor, yes.
Ms. Sherman?
I am voting yes, and the reason is that I feel that the proposal is consistent with the purpose of the City of Germantown's zoning ordinance.
Mr. Gibson?
I'm voting yes as well. For the location, I think the applicant has done what they could to minimize the view from the street. It's also co-located within an MLG&W tower. So for those reasons, I'm voting yes for this application.
Alderman Owens?
I vote yes for the reasons stated previously and by my fellow commissioners.
Mr. White?
I'm voting yes, but I want to take just 10 seconds to tell Mr. Webb I'm thankful that you've come to these meetings. It makes Germantown a great city when we have participants like that, and while it doesn't look like it's going to go in your favor, you spend a lot of time to prepare for that, and I want to say thank you for doing that because you care about our city. I am voting with our commissioners in the same way for the items already stated for the record.
Mr. Carney?
Yes, I'll vote with the commission for the items already stated, and although I can somewhat sympathize, I do not see where the cell tower necessarily adds or detracts from the electrical towers that are already there. It seems like a neutral feature to me, so I don't see how it affects, with all due respect for the gentleman's arguments, I don't see how it really affects the residential area any more or any less. So I am voting for the movement.
And Chairman Bruns?
I will be voting yes also. I do appreciate your time, Mr. Webb, and certainly you were well prepared. And I do thank you for coming in to speak about the tower and your concerns as an adjacent neighbor. I think the applicant worked hard with us in subcommittee to achieve a landscape plan that we could be proud of when we passed Neshoba. And I thank her for working hard with MLG&W to do that, because I know that is not an easy task. But for those reasons, I approve. And therefore, we do have approval of item 7A. That would be our final item. There is no old business and new business that I'm aware of, being January. So we are adjourned.